The BETT show, British Education and Training Technology Show, takes place every year, and we were fortunate enough to join from South Africa with a host of other companies and represent FEDSAS and the Centre for Technology at BETT this year. BETT is one of the most leading and biggest education technology shows in the world, with a host of international exhibitors, great speakers, and we think it's very relevant to share the information that we learned from BETT with our member schools. I have a slideshow and I'm going to take you through some thoughts of that, representing the FEDSAS Centre for Technology, looking at technological trends and what is new, especially after the COVID disruption, as well as all the new innovations that's taking place in the world. A little agenda for the day is just looking at the scope of BETT. Looking at some trending new ideas. Why is it relevant to talk about education technology, the global context that we've seen, and then some South African networking that was very visible at BETT. Firstly, the day before the show started, we visited a primary school in London, the Plumcroft School. Visited the principal, had some sessions with learners and teachers, seeing what they do and how they use technology. And what was very interesting is the context of the school that is very much similar to the South African context. It looks very modern and rich, but it is not. It is a new building that was established a few years ago. But the context is that a lot of learners at the school walk to school. They're trying to fill the school with classrooms not being full, and their money allocation from government is similar to the South African context. So yes, we learned a lot and it was very interesting there. There's a little bit of the playground and how the building looks. The day that BETT started was really overwhelming. Maybe a little bit of the context and the scope of BETT, to see that more than 30,000 visitors converge on this conference center at Excel. More than 123 countries visiting and represented there. More than 600 exhibitors, from small single stand exhibitors to the big names, the Googles, the Microsofts, the HPs, the Dells, the Acers, all the big names are there as well. And then the conference setting with a lot of great speakers. And probably this year, the most influential was the speakers in the early morning sessions in the arena. Maybe just some pictures that give some context and a little bit of play on words this year was BETT being better than ever. And that's just the entrance to the show. Scope of BETT, robotics, the fun that they had, the learners and the graffiti walls that was drawn there. My kids are Star Wars fans, and I thought of sharing this one. There is huge power in students teaching staff or teaching the older people. Had a lot of fun there, and a little video of this dancing dog coming in later on. Exhibitors from all over the world, Finland, Sweden, the Danish, the Scandinavian countries which are leading the education innovation curve on exhibit there. At the global showcase, we had Finland's Minister of Education talking. Duga is from Sweden, and they've got an online assessment tool. And then Microsoft focusing on a few nice elements there. And this is a mood or wellness board to just reflect on your mood for the day as you walk into the classroom. The early morning arena had great speakers, the likes of Stephen Bartlett, Damien Hughes, and a book launched by Damien Hughes talking about the simple steps to change your mindset. Further morning sessions, the Google team really blew our minds with what research they did and the findings of the research, and I'll reflect on some of that a little bit later on. Some of the great speakers that really impressed, and why. Henry Warren was leading one of the sessions, and he's got a foundation that they started called TOTS. It's an acronym for Turn on the Subtitles, and his drive is to ask countries to turn on subtitles on television shows. We've got the functionality in YouTube and even in Netflix, but he says turn it on permanently, Because while you're watching the screen and the words are running at the bottom, the kids read. You read more words whilst looking at the show behind the words. And he just says, let's uplift the reading. So I was really impressed by that. Stephen Jewell from the Bayous Foundation, Stephen Bartlett, one of the most popular and youngest CEOs in the world. I'm following him on Twitter, and he's got the Diaries of the CEO as a podcast series. Really riveting stuff. How he wants to shake up education. Damien Hughes, which launched a book there and really had fun with them. If I have to look at what's trending at BETT, and I want to keep this short, we can talk about each of these points in a session, but mental fitness and wellness is still a huge topic, given where we come from post-pandemic or during the pandemic. But the reflection is that we were actually not a healthy society before COVID. So mental fitness at a technology show gets a lot of airtime, and tools developed for measuring mood and just announcing good news and tracking incidents, a lot of safeguarding mental health, mental wealth, mental toughness and fitness focus, which I think is a good thing. And we've got to see the trend, because I think even in the South African context, we're sitting on a situation where the staff room is under pressure, but the households are under pressure and learners are under pressure. And we're seeing a lot of media about the influence of technology and the effect it has on learners' mental state. But I don't think it's just one, we can't just blame the cell phone and say kids were healthy before cell phones and now they're not. I think it's a whole context. So something to take note of. Something that really, really came to the fore this year, and a new word, datafication. The value of data, the purpose of data, and the big value and effect of technology is that it creates and generates a lot of data. We can report on data. So datafication, I think, is what we've got to get ourselves into and move away just from compliance reporting. We're all aware of SASAMs, and we've got to report to the department on this, that, and the other. But maybe to mine the data, if you've got a lot of data, mine it and get good insights from it, and then take corrective action. And spend the money where the problem is, instead of just, we're spending half of our budget in the wrong place, but we just don't know which half it is. So datafication is something that we've got to look at. Always fun to see what's happening on the esports arena, and to see how schools are creating leagues, how learners that might not be the greatest athletes on the fields, but some of them participate in esports as well, but they've got opportunities. They sit with their hands on the keyboards and play games representing their school. They compete, they develop, they work in a team, and it's one of those things where very little head injuries take place, and we don't need an ambulance next to the field. The development of AI, obviously with the launch of ChatGPT end of 2022, the big buzz was around AI and the influence of it. Now, AI is not new, but AI in a chat format like ChatGPT and now Bard and many others has suddenly given it an interface for us to connect with. And that probably was the biggest buzz around, but not 100% sure how it is influencing or going to influence the education sector. So something to look at there. Then the use of video and movies as classroom tools to workshop a session, to talk about language, to do creative writing based on what you see on the screen. And I think we're living in an age of being on screen. You're watching me now on video instead of just reading a paper of feedback on BETT. So yes, the use of video, the explosion of YouTube, the use of video for different language teaching and the translation. That brings me to my next point, the languages. We are very often in our South African context thinking that we are the only ones struggling with multilingualism. And it's not so. Most of Europe is struggling with the same thing. The UK, or even just the London scenario, is one of very many languages. The parents don't speak the language that the teaching is taking place at school, and the child is the only bridge between the teacher and the parent. So multilingualism and the way language focus, translation, learning multiple languages at school, and using video in that. Something that I found very interesting, and we see it when we watch sport, is how the effect of music and headsets and sound is coming to the fore. When you watch sport and you see the bus arrives with a team, out comes the sports players, whether it be the soccer players or even our own rugby players. They exit the bus with their cordless, Bluetooth, noise-cancelling headsets on, listening to their own music, playing from their cell phones. And the effect of sound, noise, and music in class, a lot of stands doing stuff with music, a lot of exhibitors using music as a tool for learning, but then also music as a tool for playing. Robotics, not so new, but still very much trending. And I'm going to play this little video of this little robot running around there. It was manually controlled, but performing like a dog, running around, sitting up straight, begging for food. Very cute tool. A lot of attention being drawn with this. But that's how mechanically sound the new tools look. A few years ago, a robot would not be able to stand by itself. Now it dribbles around. And so robotics is still a big trend. And the learning that comes from robotics. And we even had some South African robotics companies join there, like Resolute Robotics, which is a member of the Center for Technology, and showcasing their tools. Something that really came out big this year was, number one, the focus on assessment. Number two, how assessments should possibly and probably change with the focus on what we actually test. Number three, using online assessments so that learners can be assessed and have an assessment done at a self-paced journey without being in a policed environment. You can have two learners in the same room on two different screens doing the same subject or topic, but they don't have the same question on the screen at the same time. So they cannot just overlook the other one's shoulder and steal from each other. So we've got to maybe just have a new mindset on assessments. Do we test memory? Do we test knowledge? Or do we test insights? A lot of focus on that. I've touched on the plagiarism or stealing marks. And then the focus on, are we assessing for learning or are we assessing to give marks? And a big debate about why do we police so much? Because the right person must get the right marks so that we can give the right badge. Maybe that's a little bit anecdotal, but we must really focus on assessments and possibly have a debate about, are we testing for insight, testing for knowledge, testing for the use and application versus just testing for memory and ticking the box. The last point, which was really strong, is that of security. With the increased use, the increased devices, more people on devices, more people seeing screens, more people being open and susceptible to hackers, ransomware, and schools being targeted for ransomware. So yes, the security discussion needs to be amplified along with the technology discussion. It's not the one or the other. We are very used to being regulated in many areas of our lives. We lock our doors every night in South Africa. So when you open a computer, you open a cell phone, think of what is the security, the alarm system and the lock and the door that you have there. The relevance of the EdTech world in education, and I just want to focus on a few things. This graph shows the investment in venture capital companies going towards EdTech firms over the past few years. Obviously a huge jump in 2020 when COVID struck. But before then, there was already a few quantum leaps. If we look at 2015, it more than doubled, probably quadrupled. And then again in 2018, before COVID struck, the world of the investment side of things is investing in education technology, putting some hope for the future, not just dividend and reward on the financial side in that, but putting some hope in the future that technology will assist learning, assist learners, and probably bridge some gaps. Technology is scalable. Technology has a wide reach, and the access is being broadened at this point in time. So very relevant to look at edtech firms starting up and who's investing in them. The future of our pension funds might lie in some of the edtech firms that's doing good at this point in time. The same quantum leap visible there. If you see it jumped, edtech firms in 22-21, over $20 million raised worldwide for startups. This is not traditional fundamental investment. This is just the venture capitalist side of things. And there we see the trend as it continues. For 2022, it looks like a drop from investment, but it's because those venture capital companies grew so fast that they became mainstream investment options, really with big market capitalization. Relevance, the question in South Africa, worldwide. I want to ask the question, is South Africa too far away from the development curve? And the answer is no. We very often sit and think we're at the bottom tip of South Africa, and we are far away from the fire of the Northern Hemisphere. Speaking to countries like the UK, Portugal, Spain, Eastern Bloc countries, we're all struggling with very similar issues. Poverty, access, broken families, parent engagement, the new world we're living in, finding what is relevant in the curriculum. And South Africa is not far away from the curve. Yes, we have problems and we've got to solve and fix them ourselves, but the whole world is thinking about the same problems, and technology has a role to play in sorting those problems. Is the rest of the world where we think they are? No. We thought possibly during COVID that we are behind. I remember parents saying when we went into a hard lockdown, our kids are falling behind. And the question was, falling behind who? Because everyone was in hard lockdown. Yes, we've got challenges and we've got to address those, but our top performing schools in South Africa is still very competitive with the international market. And the rest of our diversity and scope of schools, very similar to some of the countries out there. Even states like California and the US are struggling with the same similar issues than we are struggling with. Maybe a little bit of that global context and what they're struggling with. I mentioned multilingualism. California has English, or the American version of English, Chinese, Spanish, in one school district, in one school. The European market struggling with the same thing, multilingualism, multiracial, multinational context in schools. Poverty, something that we think is limited to Africa or South Africa. It's not so. They are struggling with access. During the COVID pandemic, some countries reported that only 30% of learners had access to broadband at home. Parental engagement, a big struggle, and the value system of the family. Funding, school funding, government funding, same issues. Spoke to the schools in the UK. Number of learners in class, the seats being filled, call it bums on seats, make for money from the government, and that's what we're chasing for. And sometimes that throws us into a situation where we compete with a neighboring school rather than compete with the real enemy, which is bad education. Poverty, mentioned again, poverty of the context, poverty of thinking there is not enough. Broken families, and then the shadow of COVID. Very interesting, the Secretary of Education in the UK was a keynote speaker in one of the mornings, and number one, it was a new Secretary of Education, so changes in jobs in government happening fast. Number two, she was late for her talk because of traffic, something that we sometimes think is limited to the South African context, that we couldn't start on time and traffic might be a problem because of load shedding, and we experienced it in the hub of London. Just anecdotally. South African companies that were represented at BETT, showcasing some of their solutions and also networking. D6 was there, member of the Centre for Technology. Yenza, also an associate of the Centre for Technology, was there and winning an award, an international award for innovation at BETT. Snaplify, we all know. Reflective Learning, new kid on the block. Too Simple, a UK company that's also represented in South Africa. Cami Education, worldwide team was there, but we've got representation in South Africa. The Ear Academy, a new music school, online music school from Cape Town. And then one of our favorites, Resolute Robotics, also showcasing there, and networking. What did I see and why do we talk about BETT? I want to urge school leaders, school governing bodies to think about this. I did not see many people from South Africa compared to the 30,000. A few schools came on their own, and very few schools, I think 2 or 3, came with the FEDSAS team. And then the businesses were out there. So few people from SA attending. No one from government was visible. Where do we find the most leading edge innovation if we don't attend the international shows? School leaders not going. I would urge school governing bodies and school management teams to think about budgeting for this and not see it as a cost, but see it as an investment. I want to urge schools to make the investment, send someone from your team to an international show to see what's trending, what is at the forefront of development, and how we could possibly save teachers' time and change our focus. We don't want to change education. We possibly want to change the model of education and make it more, just more efficient, more bang for buck. Some of the valuable lessons that I got there, and just reflecting on what people said in some sessions, and I just made notes, a little note of, good quotes, quirks. The first one, in God we trust, all others must give the data. We cannot afford to make decisions based on our opinion or a narrative or the volume of the people that complain the most. We have to make decisions based on data. We ask how smart you are instead of how are you smart. Our sector is driven by marks at a specific time and outcomes. And one of the speakers mentioned this. He said, we want to put everyone through the same paces at the same time and then say, at this point in time, you've got 70% for this subject. Instead of now, you have 70% and you don't have 100% yet. But there might be something else that you are smart with. So the line that we ask how smart you are should change to how are you smart? Where are you smart? With what are you smart? Google blew our minds with their research, and this is the outcome of one of their research papers, that teachers that use technology effectively, that are highly skilled, making it part of their learning journey, lesson plans, assessments, self-learning, can save up to 13 hours per week with technology. If I do the math, 13 hours doesn't sound like one day, it sounds like 2 days of 6.5 hours. That is a huge portion of your working hours of the week. If we can get it right, we can put time back in the teacher's time bank. And I think then we've achieved something. Someone said, what is far-fetched will be normal. What is absurd, what is in the movies 20 years ago, will be normal today. And especially around the concept of artificial intelligence and what we can do with that. It seems like absurd now, but soon it will be very normal, very day-to-day. Just think of the tools that you use. Who would have thought that your cell phone will be your bank, will be your GPS, will be your newspaper, and suddenly it's just normal. Someone said AI is a game changer. If we do it good, do it right, regulate it in the right places, it will change the model of education as we work with it now. New words, new language, new terminology that came to the fore, and I found this interesting. Maybe a little bit quirky here and there, but someone talked about eduvate, education and innovation together. Let's not just educate, but let's eduvate. Tequity, the tech discussion along with the equity discussion. Datafication, I mentioned earlier, brand new word. We had gamification for long, but data is so important. Let's have our focus on data permeate in everything we do. PedTech instead of EdTech. Pedagogical technology. How do we implement and infuse technology to better our pedagogical delivery of our lessons? IT or inclusivity instead of inclusivity. How do we make sure that we've got access to everyone, similar to the equity discussion? Are we included in the IT discussion? And then infrastructure instead of infrastructure. We're all very happy to spend money on our buildings, water, electricity, terrain, fence. These days, your IT infrastructure is as much part of your building. It's like the roof of your building, the foundation of your building. It's got to be seen not as an IT budget, as part of the environment to ensure that you're connected to the outside world. So yes, some new words, some new language that I thought was really good. I'm hoping that we can use what we learned to bridge this digital divide. There's still a divide between those who have and those that do not have. That we can walk over this digital bridge and not just have a chasm of the divide, but actually cross the divide. That we can see that we're a digital community. We're very connected. Everyone is connected. Data is the number one strategic expense for most learners in high school. That we can go from digital divide to digital inclusion. And then that we use technology, but still remember that we are people, that we have a heart, that we have skin, and that we can see each other. I took this from the graffiti wall written at BETT. So let's be kind and enjoy the ride with technology.